Welcome to another episode of Kokumai Kompanion. And today we have another interview related to the Karate Kid musical, Sakura, Kokumai. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm really excited to speak with you for a number of reasons. We probably won't get into too much of everything that you're well established in the karate community. I don't know what it's called, right? Like, because you're like an Olympian. You've traveled the world and competed for a really long time, decades. So we'll definitely get into your backstory. But before we get into that, can you just kind of explain your role with the musical?
Yeah, for sure. So I was basically that one person that gave an insight on what it's like to be a karate athlete slash karateka is what we say to people who practice karate. They have an amazing choreographer, Keone Amari, that does an amazing job with the show. And I was there to, just be that little voice that explains, what certain movements mean, how we perform as a karate athlete, because there's so many intricate like information within the movement. And I feel like I hope that me being a part of the show has helped them choreograph what they envisioned the show to be. So yeah, it was amazing to work with them, and everybody there was amazing. They were able to pick up the movements just like that. And they're all like super fast and strong too, very powerful.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear it. We've seen some of the clips come out recently. Drew shared them. The St. Louis the stages have been sharing some really amazing clips. So really jealous of everyone that's going to be able to go and watch this live. So I'm crossing my fingers that it tours sooner than later, so that way I can watch it. Maybe hopefully in Seattle, maybe even Portland, where I'm from. Um, so yeah, that is really interesting. I think it was Robert Kamen who mentions that Keone and Mari has some background in martial arts. Do you
Mhm.
have any insight on that in the event that I don't get a chance to speak with them?
Um, I know they have taken classes, so I know them through a gym. So we train with the same strength and conditioning coach. And I know that they have been taking some classes. Not, I can't speak for them in terms of like a martial arts background.
Right, right. Yeah, because I was curious about um, the actual fight choreography.
Right.
Since they are obviously in charge of the dance, and Robert Markamen, who he himself has the background in it. I'm sure he has some input as well
Yeah.
to how certain things with the fight and stuff. So we are recording this in May, which is also Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So I'd like to get some more backstory on you and your culture. Let's start off with you were born in Hawaii. I
Was.
recently just visited back in January, and it's
Oh,
been
okay.
I think 11 years since I had been there.
Oh.
So just Oahu, just as beautiful as I remember. Uh, not as busy, obviously,
Oh yeah,
because
it
that's
must have been so
before.
different.
Yeah, there was still a little bit of restrictions at the time, but yeah, just as beautiful. But yeah, can you talk about kind of just growing up there and starting karate at what age of 7?
Yeah, for sure. So I was born in Honolulu, Hawaii, and started karate at the age of 7. My mom basically threw me into a YMCA class, basically an after school program, something to do to keep us busy while we waited for my parents to pick us up. I did all sports that you can think of, from soccer, tennis. I did sailing because we do come from like a sailing family. My brother sails. But yeah, I tried all sports, and karate was the one that, I guess I I liked more than others. It's hard
Okay.
because I loved soccer. I loved to play soccer and I loved sailing, but karate gave me something different, and felt that as a kid. So here I
Is it?
am.
Do you think it's like an adrenaline thing? Because you said you really enjoyed soccer. Personally, I hate running, but but I also had served in the military, and like all we did was run,
Okay.
and I remember the feeling of like running for like 6 miles and stuff like
Yeah.
that, and it feels really good. But if
Right.
I had an option, I'd rather not. But
Yeah.
what do you think it is for you?
No, s- I love sports. I love moving and I love team sports and like everything, right? But karate was something different. It I was a very shy kid. I was very quiet. I was never good at expressing myself, let alone like talk right in front of people. But whenever I wore the gi and the belt, like I always felt powerful as a kid. When you go into the dojo, all you have to focus on is, you listen to your sensei and you practice, right? And I think the repetition of just doing punches and kicks, blocks, just made me feel really good as a kid, only because, I was very shy when I was younger. And whenever I was practicing inside the dojo, it really made me feel powerful. And I was very fortunate to be able to, look up to a lot of female athletes in the dojo too. They were representing the US, they were world champions. And I went to the dojo because I just wanted to be like them, right? So everything they did, I was mimicking every single movement from, I think even from like how they were drinking their water, what kind of bags, all the bags that they're carrying, I wanted the exact same thing. So, I was just that kid that followed these people. And the more I learned about kata, the more I felt connected to it. um I wish I could dance, but I did take some dancing classes. But anyways, like through kata I was able to express myself, and all the anxiety and all this weird feeling that I couldn't express, I was able to express through kata. So, those things I was never able to experience through other sports. And I realized that karate was something I needed. Rather, it wasn't me picking, but I s- I knew that I couldn't see myself without karate. So yeah.
That is interesting. So, for those that never did martial arts, including
Mm,
myself, can you talk about kata and
for
the
sure.
purpose of it? Because
Yeah,
for those that seen the Karate
definitely,
Kid or
definitely.
Cobra Kai, we
Yeah.
see them do it, and we saw it in part three where it
Okay.
was used in a tournament. Yeah, just your
Um,
insight on that.
yeah, for sure. Heads up, it is very different from what you guys see in the shows. But in karate, there's two disciplines, kata and kumite. So kumite is basically sparring. When we go to competitions, we wear hand pads, shin guards, mouthpiece, body protector inside the gi, and you basically fight each other and get points within a certain time. Kata is a form, so it's basically a combination of blocks, kicks, punches, and it could go as long as maybe 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes. The shortest one is probably like a minute, even less. And there's different variations. Everything is by the books, so you cannot change anything about it. Every movement has its own meaning. So meaning as in if I'm blocking and I'm turning to the right from my left direction, it means that is attacking from the other side. So it's basically telling a story of a fight. And my discipline is kata. So when I compete, I would go into the ring, I would perform a kata, I step out, I wait for the score, and whoever has the high score advances. Now, it's very different than I think what you guys see in the show or the movies. But I do have to say that, especially with the original movie, they did an amazing job portraying, the martial art aspect of a karate rather than the athleticism or the sports side of it. And that's why I love the show and the movie. And I still rewatch it whenever I have time. It reminds me of my sensei too. I feel like we all have our Mr. Miyagi in our life, to all the karate athletes out there. So yeah, so those are the differences. I could go on and on
Right.
if you let me talk about karate.
Sure. I know I get it. You're very passionate, obviously, and it shows in all of your accomplishments. Very, very impressive.
Thank you.
You mentioned the kumite. So this is my ignorance, for those that are big fans of blood sport. So kumite means tournament, you said?
Kumite means sparring.
Sparring, right.
Yes.
So in the movie Bloodsport, when they say that, they're just talking about fighting. That's it. I just thought that was like a really good name for a tournament
Right,
this
right.
whole time. So
Yeah,
okay, that's really interesting.
yeah.
Um, Now, not often do I hear, especially for Asian American or I'm also a son of immigrants, and all these things. Like we have these certain expectations of us as kids, and these paths, to become doctors and lawyers. That whole trope and cliche. Were your parents ever like that? Obviously, you said that you were very heavy into sports.
Yeah.
Did they at some point say we would like you to have this other path as well? Or it sounds like they were very supportive of karate.
Yeah, I was very lucky to have supporting parents, but at the same time, they never allowed me to do just sport, right? I went to Japan for my undergrad and my master's, and karate in Japan is what basketball or football is to the US. So they have their own college leagues, and we were able to be like student athletes. So knowing how that system worked, I did go to school in Japan, but my parents definitely made sure that I was a well-rounded person. They never pushed me to just do sports. I'm able to play an instrument, like a traditional Japanese instrument called koto and shamisen. I started that way before I started karate. And they never pushed me to do anything that I didn't want. Oof, that's a hard one. You see, I'm thinking right now.
Yeah.
But they were never like, oh, you have to have this career, right? That wasn't really a thing. But they definitely pushed me to be a well-rounded person, and that came with having balance, so going to school, um, and if I'm doing karate, put everything into karate, um, and even playing the instrument too. Like they never allowed me to do it like half. If I'm going to do it, I have to do it all the way.
Right, like go all in.
Hmm.
Yeah. So you spent some time in Hawaii. What was it that took you to California?
Very good question. So I was in Hawaii until high school. I was doing a lot of back and forth, and college is when I went to Japan. So I stayed in Kyoto for 4 years and Tokyo for 2 years. So 6 years total I was in Japan, and I was doing back and forth from there.
Wow.
I was working in Japan after I finished school, corporate. I was one of those salary man slash woman person. I wore a suit, took the train, did all that. The reason why I went to California was to pursue my Olympic dream. Um, we were the first. Karate was never in the Olympics in the past, and there was no like blueprint, like an example of how to get ourselves there. Because we were not like fully funded at that time, I did need to work. That's why I was working. But I soon realized that I was putting 50% into work and 50% into karate. And, you know, growing up in a household where they made sure you put 110% into what you do, it really made me feel like I wasn't giving enough to the sport, and it showed in my performance too. So what I did was I quit my job because I knew that I wanted to get myself to the Olympics. So the first thing I did was quit my job, not knowing what to do next. I had no plans at all. Yay. But this one family in California, their son did karate, their youngest son. They basically were like, we have an extra bedroom. Why don't you just come over and figure it out from there? So what I did was I packed all my stuff and I flew to LA. I knew the family because the mom is Japanese, and we met at, I think, one of the U.S. national tournaments somewhere, and that's where the connections all happened. But they basically had an extra bedroom, and I had nowhere to go, so I packed all my stuff and moved. That was almost the Christmas of 2017. Our Olympic qualifier started at 2018. So as soon as I moved, I was already gone, and I was going in and out of the house every 2 to 3 weeks. So I'm pretty sure in the beginning the family was like, "What did we get ourselves into?"
Wow.
But now they're like my second family. Thanks to them, I was able to, get myself to the Olympics, and the support that they have given me meant more than like everything. So
Yeah, that's such an incredible story, and like so inspiring too. You really quit your job to pursue your dreams, and it came true.
I
That's
mean, it sounds dramatic, but at the same time, like it really made sense because I was falling asleep while I was stretching. Like it wasn't doing me any good. So, now that I say it, it does sound a little dramatic, but at the time it made most sense because I really wanted to put everything into the sport, and I didn't want any regrets. So,
yeah, and it doesn't sound like you have any.
no.
Yeah. So this next part, like, I mean, everything's just so fascinating, but uh, I did email you some questions, and so it appears, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you have some ties to the Miyagi verse. Uh, do you happen to know Taman Tomita and Yuji Okamoto?
I have met Tamlin a couple of times. Not usually though. I'd
Okay.
love to. Hi. I think we're Instagram friends or something. But no, when I moved to Los Angeles, a whole backstory there, which I will not go over because that's gonna take another podcast. But
You should write
basically
a
the people,
memoirs.
huh?
You should write a memoirs. Like you have
Oh
such a
yeah, no,
like a
it's
fantastic
coming.
story.
It's coming. But I met an amazing group of people in Little Tokyo. Um, and the J community there has helped me so much leading up to the Olympics. It started off small. I was just there to practice because, I wanted something different. I was so focused on competing and competition and flying. Just being in that dojo made me feel more centered because they were there to practice karate and that's it. They weren't focusing on sport. They were purely there to practice the martial art. And the kids there are amazing. The people there are amazing. So through that connection, I was able to. I had a pleasure of meeting Tamlin a few times. She is so amazing. I think there was one like Obon festival this one time, and I wasn't even thinking, but she just like pulled me and she gave this huge introduction to the crowd, and I was just again I became that shy kid again, and I was like, like what's happening? But no, I was able to meet her a couple of times, and she's such an inspiration.
So let me. Maybe I should have asked this earlier, but and you kind of mentioned it. So, what is your history with the Karate Kid movies?
History with the movies.
Yeah,
Um, Huge fan since the very beginning. That's a question, right? Like
yeah,
history of
yeah. So, so,
my
so like,
connection to the movie.
oh no, more just history of it. Like like for me, I grew up watching part two the most,
Okay.
and yeah, and like I love part one. I think it's a great movie. It's a great story. But part two,
Mhm.
we learned so much more about Miyagi. And I
Right.
shared the story before. I'm almost a decade older than you, and so I in the late '80s, early
Mhm.
'90s, there wasn't a lot of people that looked like us on screen.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
really enjoyed watching the Karate Kid Part Two because it was like 90 whatever percent Asians at the very least.
Yeah, for
So that
sure.
was the other thing. But also, my little story is that my grandfathers all lived out of state, and so
Okay.
Miyagi was like a grandfather for me, and so that's
Oh,
why I would watch those movies.
yeah, for sure. No, so for me, gosh. When I
Because
say I
I'm
had my own Mr. Miyagi, so whenever I watch that movie, reminds me of my sensei. He passed away probably like 7 years ago by now, 6 or 7 years ago, but he was that one person that changed my life. And obviously, when I was watching the movie, that's not something I think about because he was still there.
right,
But a lot of the things in the movie, for example, I'm gonna point out the scene, the wax on, wax off scene, right? He's basically teaching him to do a movement without teaching him what it initially is supposed to mean.
right,
So I had my own experience like that. I would go to a dojo, and I we didn't even he didn't even allow me to practice kata. Like my posture was all wrong. So I just did this one movement that was way, like, it was very different than the kata itself. But I just kept doing that for hours and hours and hours. And he forgets about time. So we didn't have lunch. Forget about water, right? Because like you have to do these things until sensei tells you to stop. And he encouraged us to take notes too while we train. And I looked back at one of my notes and it was so funny. I'm pretty sure I was so hungry because in those notes there was like I was drawing apples and bananas or something. I was like probably starving to death. But again, he does this thing after 3 days of training. Like I at the time I have no idea what I'm doing, right? Like I want to practice kata, like this is what I came here for. Why am I doing this? A 15-year-old myself, like me. And before I go home, he teaches, like he does something where we go, oh, like he makes us do certain movements and it's fixed because all I've been doing was that one movement for 3 days for like 10 hours straight. And he had the power to teach that way. So from that, I go home and obviously I tell this to my mom, right? Like to my parents. I'm like, okay, this is what we did. I don't know what I did. I'm just tired. Like, I don't think I want to go back. But there was that one thing that, like, it was like a spark. Like, because my body was able to do something that I wasn't able to do before. So now I'm craving for that, right? So I what do? I go back again. I take a trip back to see that sensei so I can learn from him. And the more I train with him, the more he taught me a whole lot more than just kata. It sounds very cheesy, but he definitely taught me how to train, like more the ways of training, because I do practice a lot on my own. And whenever I go to train with that sensei, he gives me feedback, he criticizes everything that I do, he fixes everything, and then I go home and I train by myself. So that was my pattern. Anyways, going back to the movie, some of the small things that they portray in the movie is exactly how karate athletes or karatekas experience. So those things I was able to relate to like a lot by watching it, the first movie and the second movie too. So I think that feeling of learning and having a sensei, a role model to look up to ask for advice about life, those things I had. And now with sensei passing away, whenever I watch that movie, it reminds me of him too. Right. So those are like my personal connections to the movie. And it definitely motivates me to go back to the dojo and focus on the little things, because as an athlete, we tend to just focus on the performance, right? And getting that medal. But the reality is you do have to go back to the basics and do the simple things and do that repeatedly to achieve what you want to achieve. So those little, lessons that they teach you in the movie, I think I personally take that into my own experience.
I absolutely. I think that's why a lot of people can relate to the movie as well. Even just outside of karate, I think just the lessons in life people can apply some of the things that they learn.
Yeah.
So did had you? So I guess with Tamlin, did you meet her in any other way before that moment where you said she pulled you off to the side, or
Actually, that might have been my first time. So I was like,
so she
oh my
knew who you
God.
were?
I'm sorry.
She knew who you were.
Yeah, well, there was somebody in between that was kind of like, oh yeah, this is
Oh,
that
okay.
athlete that's trying to get herself to the Olympics. Because at that time I wasn't in yet. But that I believe that would be the first time, and after that I have met her a couple times.
I I didn't meet her, but just last month I was at an event down in LA for Cobra Kai,
Yeah.
and after the panel and the Q&A and stuff, I was kind of just meandering around, and then I bumped into some of the writers of the show, and
Hmm.
started speaking with them. And then security was kicking all of us out because we were all just hanging out, and some of the kid actors were in the crowd, and they got bombarded for autographs and what have you. But anyway, as we are all leaving, I see this woman standing off to the side, and she's holding her phone, and she has a mask on. And I grew up with Karate Kid Part Two. I was like, that looks like Tamlin. Is that Tamlin Tamita? Like I kind of look at her, but I don't want to stare. And she like I feel like she looks at me, but then looks away. And then I asked somebody, I was like, "Is that Tamlin Tamita?" And they're like, "No, I'd be surprised if she came." I go, oh, "Okay." I just keep on going. And then not too long afterwards, I was on Instagram and I saw her post that she was in there and she took a picture from her seat. I was like, "That was her." So
Yeah.
I
No,
missed out on
she's
meeting her.
amazing. She's
Yeah.
so amazing, and very inspiring. She does a lot for the community too. So like, you know, uh, I don't know. Whenever I talk to her, I'm always in a good mood, and I feel like I just want to keep asking her questions, and I want to learn more about what she does and her thought process and everything. But the more with what she does to the community, I think it's amazing with what she does. Um,
Yeah. Well,
Learn a lot about her.
I don't remember what it was, but I saw something that weren't you in Seattle for something some time ago?
I was in Seattle, not for an event though.
No, maybe you were just in passing, but UG has a couple restaurants up in northern Washington, so maybe you could
Yeah,
see him one day
yeah,
that
I
way.
would love. Actually, we do have USA Nationals coming up in Spokane.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah, I'm gonna fly to Seattle, and the host family, the family I stayed with, is in Seattle. So their youngest son, we're gonna actually drive from Seattle to Spokane. So that'll be actually be a
Okay.
good time to visit.
Yeah, yeah. Reach
Yeah,
out and make sure that he'll be there.
for sure.
I
Yeah, I
I
love
had
Seattle.
yeah, yeah. It's a really great city.
Yeah.
Portland is like little sister to Seattle is what we call ourselves. But
Yeah.
I had the honor and privilege to had interviewed Yuji a couple of times, and after the first time, it was before we ever would see him on Cobra Kai, and
Mhm.
so at that time, I only spoke with him about the Karate Kid 2.
Right.
And then one day, a buddy of mine, we were talking, and we're like, yeah, let's go check out his restaurant. Why not? So, I messaged him, like, hey, Yuji, a buddy of mine, we would like to come up and check out your restaurant. Will you be at one of those locations on this day? And then so we just kind of coordinated, and I drove up, and he sat down and had lunch with us the entire time. So very, very friendly. And him and Tamlin are like lifelong friends, and so he's just as friendly as I'm sure she is.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah, that'd be
I'll
really cool.
definitely put that down so I can
Yeah.
visit.
How would you approach for the musical? It
Yeah.
sounds like a very specific thing because uh obviously there's I don't imagine you were just in St. Louis for
No,
that.
it was gosh. So I know, where do I start? So the question is how, right?
Yeah,
Um
like how were you? Yeah. reached out for this?
Timing and meeting the people and the whole universe, the whole full circle thing.
Yeah.
But so I train at the Optimum Training and Performance in San Diego. It's a gym in San Diego, and the coach that I work with, Nia, is also a coach of Keoni and Mari, who are the choreographers for the show. So we cross paths many times in the gym, and like I love Keoni and Marnie, what they do. So, every time I see him, see them, I say hi. And we, I wonder if we trained a few times together, but we basically cross paths all the time at the gym. And yeah, from there, long story short, they were telling me about the project that they were working on, and they mentioned Karate Kid, and I was like, what? Like, Karate Kid, a musical? Like that's like, how is it gonna look like? Right. So it's starting from that connection, and because we train at the same place with the same coach, we basically had some like cross trainings where I taught them what I do as a karate athlete, and from there it just kind of connected.
Okay. Yeah. So it's kind of like networking. You were kind of the right person, and you guys all knew each other.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And they're
Yeah.
amazing. Like when they said that they were gonna work on it, I was like, like I cannot wait to see, because they're gonna do some magical things with the show.
Right. And I know you can't speak too much on it. Can you talk about like some of the training that we have seen? Just kind of uh, for you mentioned a lot of the people, and how they move and all this. Like, is it complicated to teach people who don't know martial arts for certain movements and things like this?
Yeah, it was a challenge and a learning experience for me, because sometimes I would burst out karate phrases thinking that, they all know what I'm talking about. But sometimes I have to take a step back, and I was like, okay, like I have to actually explain what these things are, right? So those were the little things that I needed to make sure that I explained, all these little vocabularies and phrases in karate. But other than that, I just work with them with the simple punch, starting from a punch, block, kicks, right? The simple things that you need to learn karate. And then from there, uh, because we were like very short on time too, we went through some kata movements, Seienjin, made sure they all got the circular movement, the soft side, and all the movements right. And yeah, just went through the basics, kata. And then honestly, from there, it's the reason why I was there was just to show, what karate is from my experience, right? And from there, like whatever they take from it, I just excited to see like what kind of creativity they put within the movements so that it becomes a show, like a musical.
Now, did you have any hand in like the different styles for the Cobras versus Miyagi-Do, which in this case is probably just Daniel. But like for Jake and John, did you
Mhm.
have to show them anything differently so that way they're not kind of appearing to be doing the same type of kata or any other movements?
Nothing too different from my end. I just wanted to show them what karate is, and what it means to me and how we perform and train. And I did have a lot of conversations with Keoni and Marty in terms of, what movements are considered soft and circular, what movements are considered, like strong and like more aggressive. So those are the conversations that I did have with them. But for me to work with everybody, it was more of a purpose of me showing what I do as a karateka.
Okay.
Yeah.
As we get ready to wrap up, when I spoke with Drew, he also said that you showed him some things. Can you talk about that?
Sorry, one more time.
Oh, Drew, he said that you showed him some things too, because he doesn't need to learn, but he said that he did as well, just so he can, get in, as involved as he can with the musical.
Yeah, I did had a pleasure of like performing a kata. So I basically explained the thought process of me performing because, I don't go in just to kick and punch and be all aggressive and yell, right? It's an art form for me. So how we start with a bow, the breathing, right, and the sound of the gi, like the uniform that we wear, from the start to finish. There's like the peak where you bring everything up, and then you go down a little bit, and then you go through some movements. So there's like a lot of ups and downs, and it's our job as athletes to put life into the kata, right? There's no music, there's nothing to rely on but purely on our movements. And each of us are shaped differently. We all have different personalities, and we as karatekas just needs to put something different into these katas. So I just explained that through the, in terms of thought process of when I perform. And towards the end of the class, I had a pleasure of performing one kata in front of everybody. So I think that's what he was talking about, maybe.
Possibly.
Yeah.
And where can, for those that are interested, where can people see you next? You mentioned the Spokane. Is that going to be televised?
Yes. So in terms of schedule, I'm actually leaving tomorrow. I will be going to Curacao. There's going to be a Pan American Championships. So North, Central, South American countries are going to be there, and we're all going to compete to see who's the number one athlete in the continent. Um, so it's a big one. After that, I will be in Spokane, and that will be a USA Nationals. That will be the first team trials. It's basically a trial to select athletes for the following year. So you'll have mostly the top athletes from all over the country compete in that tournament. And the following week, I will be in Birmingham, Alabama for the World Games. So World Games, that's going to be one festive event because it's every 4 years and it's not just karate. There's I know there's sumo. There's sumo, karate, like all different like ball sports from beach volleyball. So there's like different multiple sports that's going to be in Alabama. So that is gonna be one of the big highlight events for me this year.
Awesome. Yeah, looking forward to seeing you on there.
Thank
I
you.
yeah, just finding out more about people in this universe. It's kind of expanded my horizons, and kind of consuming other things that I otherwise wouldn't have, So I'm really interested to see that. Where can people follow you if they want to kind of follow your journey? Since
Yeah,
you
for
have
sure. No,
so many things.
I'm always on Instagram, Sakura Kokumai Karate. So first, last name, and karate. And I do my best with TikTok, but I don't know how I'm doing it. But I'm on social media, and if you look through it with my name, I'll definitely pop up. But yeah,
All
that's
right.
that's where you guys can follow me. And
It,
like I really just have to say that as a karate athlete, this musical, the Cobra Kai TV series, even the movies, has definitely brought in like bigger audiences, and we already had that in the past already, right? But with karate and the Olympics and me being able to experience, representing my country, and then knowing that people are actually more interested in the sport really means a lot to me. So, like, to those who are listening, you guys are awesome. If you guys have not tried karate, you have to, because it will definitely change your life.
yeah, it's kind of like the '80s all over again. People credit the Karate Kid for getting them into martial arts, whichever version of it,
Mm.
and I feel Cobra Kai kind of did that again. Now,
Yeah,
you did name drop the show. Do you watch the show?
I did. I have.
Yeah,
I love
and
it.
yeah. Clearly, so do I. Do you have some
Uh,
favorite characters?
ah, gosh, all the old school. There's one episode when they literally just traveled back in time. Tamlin was in it too. That one episode is my favorite.
The one where she reads all the letters from Miyagi.
Yep, yeah,
So
that's my favorite.
emotional. It's a great
Yeah,
episode. And then
yeah.
the next one would have Yuji. sparring with Daniel too. So,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
I guess Chosen and Daniel. So
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
a great episode.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, looking forward to season 5. That comes out September
Yes.
9th for those
I'm
that didn't know.
excited.
So
I'm excited.
yeah, thank you again, Sakura, for speaking with me. And to all of our listeners, thank you guys for checking out this interview, and hopefully you guys look into the Karate Kid the musical wherever well, you know, when it goes to Broadway, and hopefully potentially on tour later on sometime down the line. You know, we'll put that out there once we find out about it. So thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you guys.